I got so used to being the only woman in the room, I didn't even notice it anymore. Did you know that only 31% of sales leaders are women, even though 50% of the sales reps are women? I'm Amy Evans. After 25 years of sales leadership in corporate America, I help B2B tech and AI CEOs hit their number as a sales strategy advisor. I also host the Women in Sales Leadership podcast, where you'll learn what it takes to lead at the highest level, withstand the pressure to deliver the numbers, and elevate your career without losing yourself. No fluff, just the real stuff of women in sales leadership. If you aspire to become a CRO, vice president, first-time sales leader, or start your own business, you're in the right place. You are going to want to stop right now and click follow so you don't miss the episodes that drop every week. Welcome to the Women in Sales Leadership podcast. Today's episode brings you the inspiring, no-holds-barred journey of Wendy Harris, a globetrotting powerhouse who has carved her own path from Ireland to Windsor, from Goldman Sachs to groundbreaking tech firms. Wendy's story is one of resilience and reinvention. She spent years in finance before boldly shifting to the tech industry, facing rejection after rejection along the way. Yet, of course, Wendy refused to give up. In this episode, Wendy takes us behind the scenes, sharing lessons on building winning culture and creating an empowered, human-centric workplace where excellence and vulnerability coexist. Her perspective on loyalty, leadership, and knowing your value is raw, real, and unforgettable. If you've ever struggled with playing small, working with the wrong boss, or finding the courage to ask for help, Wendy's wisdom will leave you fired up. Join us for a conversation packed with insights, honesty, and a dash of humor as Wendy encourages you to go beyond your comfort zone and to choose the right mentors to become the brightest, most authentic version of yourself. All right. Well, Wendy Harris, oh my gosh, it's been a little while for us to get to this point. I know you've been busy traveling around the world, and I'm so delighted to be here with you today and hear a little bit about you and your story and give the listeners of the Women in Sales Leadership podcast, what do they need to know about Wendy Harris, and what can you share with women who are in sales leadership or women who are considering being in sales leadership? So I'm so glad to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Amy. I'm delighted to be here, and thanks for your patience with getting this scheduled.
Well, you're such a popular world traveling woman. I understand. So Wendy, why don't we get started at the natural starting point, which is the beginning, right? So let's introduce you to everybody. Tell everybody who you are, where you live, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I am from Ireland, but I actually live in Windsor in the UK. So the Windsor Castle's out behind us there, the stables.
Wow.
So I grew up in Ireland. I until I was in college there. Then I moved to London to work for Goldman Sachs for 11 years. Spent 2 of those in Chicago. Moved back to London again for a few years, and then have been back in Dublin the last 10 years before working for technology firms. And then I just moved back to Windsor, so in the UK again in April of this year. So wow. I've been all over the place.
Oh my goodness. Wonderful. And of course, it looks like it's a beautiful day for those who aren't going to be able to see this photo, but it's gorgeous where you are right now. Well, why don't we give folks a little bit of perspective on you, Wendy? Tell me your story.
Sure, yeah. So I want to give hope to people that don't know what they want to do and are maybe a younger generation, but I had no idea what I wanted to do in college. So I thought I was going to be a vet. I ended up doing business and French instead and spent a year of that in college in France, which was cool. And then the last year of college, again, no idea what I wanted to do. Went around to a series of these things called Milk Round, where investment banks and other firms, consulting firms, sort of were looking for applicants. And I happened to attend one by Goldman Sachs, and I saw a video of the trading floor and I was hooked. And so I spent, after 32 interviews, no less than 32 interviews over 6 months, I spent 11 years there. I got the job and I wasn't leaving in a hurry after all those interviews. So I worked there as a trader. I worked in London, I worked in Chicago, and then I moved into sales trading. And I really loved my time at Goldman. But after 11 years, I wanted to do something different, and I was looking to move into technology, which was far harder than it should be, moving industry. So no tech recruiter understood what over a decade at Goldman Sachs means. So I spent a year interviewing and nowhere would give me a job. And they said I was too senior, but I wasn't senior enough. And I was just applying for sales roles in tech firms or account manager roles, couldn't get any. And eventually I did a digital marketing course for 6 months. And thereafter, my first role that I got in tech was on a contract at Facebook in content marketing, earning 10% of what I used to earn. So I was just determined to get my foot in the door and just start somewhere. And I knew once I did that, I'd scrap my way back up. And so that's exactly what happened. From there, I went on to a first sort of sales leadership role at a company called AdRoll. Then I went on to run European sales for Dropbox. Thereafter, I went to a company called Car Gurus, where I ran European sales. And my most recent job was at Gong, which is an artificial intelligence firm, where I was the first employee in Europe and built the business out to 80 people and 25 million in revenues. So it's been a great journey, very different. I haven't had the career path less traveled, I would say.
I don't think you're alone, though. I think a lot of the people that end up in tech sales and tech sales leadership, it's a circuitous route. I know mine was, for sure. I mean, it just kind of, but you, man, wow. Going from Goldman to a marketer job.
I know, right?
Wow.
But you know what? You don't know what you don't know. You know, at the time, I was super frustrated that I couldn't get a job in tech. But I also, in retrospect, like I understood that my ramp would have been longer. You know, when you're not in an industry and you don't know all the acronyms and, you know, all the buzzwords that go with it, I would have had a longer ramp. But now I'm pretty passionate about helping people change industry, because I think it's very short-sighted to leave this whole, like, technology is kind of the new finance. You know, people now, I realized in sort of the late 2000s, around 2010, 2011, we were losing people not to JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley. We were losing them to Google and Facebook. And I was like, this is an interesting shift. And I think it is something that I think realistically I would have had a longer ramp time, but large tech firms are able to absorb that. It's just the smaller startup tech firms that can't absorb someone who can't hit the ground running. So I think people need to be a bit more open-minded about backgrounds. I think people can be too hung up on finding the perfect CV. And as you say, everybody has different routes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Did you ever have anybody that you hired on your teams in all that experience that just was completely out of left field, no background in tech? Can you share a little bit about that?
I had someone who was a communications coach and was a brilliant communications coach. And actually, I had been hired by Dropbox to train me I used to be pathologically fearful of public speaking. And so he came in, which people are surprised by because I'm pretty confident, but I had a hung up about public speaking. So he came in to help me with the ums and the ahs and the everything else and far more than that. But that was the basic. I used to every 2 words. So I hope I less, but I still, but anyway, he said that I was, you know, I really enjoyed working with him. I thought he was excellent at what he did. I really liked him. We sort of continued a friendship over the next 2 or 3 years. He came in and did some training again for my leadership team at Car Gurus. And then a position came up at the most recent company, Gong. And ultimately I had a conversation with him around that time. And he had never worked in the industry, but I said, look, if you're open to it, it's sort of a good managerial position to go into for the first time in the industry. And he did, and he's been absolutely brilliant at flying. So shout out to him, Martin Garvey.
There's a lot of people out there that are just like that. Absolutely. It takes a lot of fortitude to make sure that you're making the right bet and taking the right risk on a person that doesn't have that industry knowledge, but has that magic special sauce that is transferable no matter where you go.
Exactly, yeah. And I don't regret it. He's turned out to be brilliant. So I'm very grateful. Felicity McCarthy took a chance on me at Facebook, and, you know, you have to pay it forward. We all need someone to take a chance on us.
Absolutely. I'm sure everybody, I certainly have had lots of people take a chance on me more than once. And it's always turned out really well. So I've been lucky that way. So let's go back in time a little bit to when you first became a sales leader. What surprised you most about your first sales leadership role?
I think that there was kind of like a lack of process. I'm someone, I suppose, who growing up in Goldman Sachs is my first job. Like I like a plan, I like consistency, and I like I like a process. But I also found that as an opportunity, that it was, it's something that when you do have consistency and you do have a process, then you can measure, okay, what's working, what's not working, what do we need to do differently? So I think with that, it was around everyone's got their own unique way of doing things, and that should absolutely be the case to an extent, but there needs to be some level of consistency across revenue orgs so you can compare different teams and say, okay, outside of the individuals and outside of the leader, what are the comparables across the board? The bigger the revenue orgs get, the more important that is. So I'm a big believer in sort of putting in processes. It might not sound very sexy, and it's not, but it is also necessary to achieve high performing teams and understand where things are going wrong and where you can tweak things.
For sure. I mean, it's the process is like the recipe to make the dinner. It's the dinner's not going to taste great or be if you're just kind of winging it, unless you're a chef, and most folks aren't at this level of their game in sales and tech. They're still learning and evolving. They haven't reached a mastery yet. So that makes absolute sense to me. Process and lack thereof when you first became a sales leader. I can see that. I've been in organizations that had the same. Did you have any female leaderships in your career?
Yeah, I had one, absolutely. I was so lucky to have, well, first of all, there was a woman at Goldman Sachs who had a great mantra, which I really appreciated. She moved over from America. Her name is Lisa Shallett. And she always said to us something that stuck in my brain even when I was very young, which is that the leader sets the tone.
Hey there, I'm pausing the show for a moment. I want to extend an invitation to you to follow this show. Please stop right now and take just 15 seconds to hit follow on whichever app you're listening on. I know you are a generous person, and one more invitation I have is for you to please take a moment now and forward this episode to a friend who you think might enjoy it. It would go a long way to making a difference and spreading the word about women in sales leadership. Thank you so much, and back to the show.
And she always said to us something that stuck in my brain even when I was very young, which is that the leader sets the tone. And I've always tried to remind myself of that because I'm very conscious I can use my energy for good or for bad. And, leaders can change the energy of a room. And that's a power that you should, hold with sort of carefully in your hands and make sure you use it for good. But the leader does set the tone. And so the tone I try and set with organizations is one of absolute excellence, but also I really believe in combining fun and vulnerability. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to choose fun over excellence or excellence over fun. It's possible to have all of the above. So that sort of sticks in my brain.
Well, sounds like she's pretty phenomenal. Was there any bad leadership advice that you got?
Bad leadership advice?
Yes.
So bad leadership advice. Yes, I think there's a cohort of leaders who really believe in hiding information from people underneath them and seeing information as power and elevating themselves because they don't share it. I don't agree with that. It's something along the lines of if you don't tell them what they don't know won't hurt them. And I just think that's ridiculous. Like, empower the people beneath you with as much information as possible. Help them understand the why behind decisions. Help them understand when, things are tough and we need them to dig deeper and why we're making the decisions we're making. I think you need to treat people with respect and as equals and not try and put yourself on a pedestal and pretend that others are beneath you and that you're so important because you've got a leader title. So I have no time for that sort of nonsense, frankly.
I don't know who does. I don't know. I can't believe these folks are still out there today doing that stuff.
I know.
Yeah. I know it's still out there. It's okay. There's not everybody's learning and getting better. Everybody's learning and getting better. So speaking of learning and getting better, what are some of the things that you know or you've learned that you wish other people knew?
I think one of the most important things that I'm so passionate about, and I mentioned this earlier, is around vulnerability. And what I mean by that is in the workplace, people see it as sometimes weakness to be vulnerable and to admit when you need help or to admit when you don't know. And frankly, nobody has all the answers. I always joke that, nobody has any idea what they're doing and everyone's just trying to figure it out. And just because you stand in front of a room of 100 people or 1,000 people, don't pretend that that you've got your body armor on and you're all seeing and all knowing, because we're not. And this comes down to, I have found I've had a seizure disorder and I've had issues with my health sometimes over my career. And I've always found when I'm willing it took me a while, and it was probably the longest lesson it took me to learn. But when I was willing to ask for help and tell people, you know what, I'm actually not feeling okay today. Can you step in for me and do this meeting with this customer? People are more than delighted to do that. I think that there is vulnerability is underestimated, and the willingness to bring your full human to the workplace, and also to see others as human first as well. And when you show that you don't have body armor on, when you show that you are human and you make mistakes and you are sometimes not the best version of yourself, you give other permission around you to do the same. And so it builds trust and it builds the right sort of culture, I believe.
My gosh, so straight on. I really identify with what you said when you talked about asking for help. And that is something that I struggled with in my career too. That was really early on. I thought it was such a sign of weakness to ask for any help at all. Even when I was an individual contributor, I struggled with it. I thought, oh, I should be able to know how to do this. I should be able to figure this out. And it took having a leader who was really tough on our team, really the right kind of tough though, right? The kind of tough that helps you be better. And he set the standard for, if you're doing it alone, you can only get so far. And then eventually you're going to run yourself into the ground, or you're just going to miss opportunities because you're not getting help and asking for help. So that's a tough one, I think, for a lot of strong, powerful female leaders to learn. I don't know if it's unique to women or...
I don't think it's unique to women. Definitely not. But what I do think is that, and certainly what I have felt, sometimes you're the only woman in the room or the only woman on the leadership team, which, by the way, when you have the responsibility to hold the door open as long as wide as possible for other women to come through it. So that's an aside. But I think when you are the only woman, I have sometimes felt the weight of carrying my gender. I remember even at Goldman, my first, I was one of only like 3 female traders. I remember the other 2 were out one day and I was in a meeting with all the male traders, and it was like 35 of us in a room and I was the only female, and I was praying I wouldn't get asked a question I didn't know the answer to, because I didn't want to let womanhood down. It's like we carry this mantle of, but so I was like, but that's not helpful either, right? So, but I do think it probably perpetuates the issue, the gender issue, when there's not enough gender balance in the room. And so therefore you feel like you have to be superwoman, when actually the opposite is true.
Absolutely. That is true. Absolutely. You talked about, I was looking at your posts on LinkedIn. I love them, by the way.
Thank you.
Anybody who hasn't seen your Kim Kardashian video is in
there you go.
But yeah, the one that really caught my eye that I think so many people struggle with is this one, is the cost of loyalty. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I think it's something that I've struggled with all my life. And it is something first of all, I hold loyalty as a very strong value. I kind of know my top 5 values, and I encourage everyone in the workplace to know them. And so, when something happens that's a deal breaker for you. But loyalty is, I did myself a disservice for years by being misguidedly loyal to a company. So for example, I would say, okay, well, if I love my boss and I love this company, how could I ever leave? But because I felt that way, I never took calls from recruiters. And I think that does you a disservice. Taking calls from recruiters should be just seen as building your network. It doesn't have to be the right job, but right then, but maybe 3 to 4 years down the line, it could be the right job. And also, it helps you understand your benchmark for compensation, helps you build a connection. And by the way, if you don't want the job, you might know someone else who does want the job. And so it's always good to pass it on as well. But I'm very passionate about making sure people understand their value and maximize their value in the workplace. And there's no real way to maximize your value unless you don't seek out conversations with external recruiters, even when you're happy, and take the calls. And I'm not saying you need to take every single call, but you should be taking calls semi-regularly, because that gives you power if you're happy with internal negotiations, if you find out that actually you're benchmarked below the market with what you're paid currently. And I think, the asymmetry of information between what firms have and what employees have is a problem. And I think everyone needs to be responsible for their own career progression. And in order to do that, you have to go and find out what the benchmark truly is for what you're getting paid and what other opportunities are out there. So yeah, so I think loyalty, it is not disloyal to take calls. And there is always the right way to leave. But I'm still friends with most of my old bosses. It's like that's the way it works. And, you're not going to love every boss you work for. That's also not realistic in life. But there's some people I love and I would take bullets for. And I have resigned to them and left on great terms. And that is very possible. And the reality is most people do not stay for their full career in one job. It's just not very, very unlikely nowadays. So this happens. It's real, but you can do it in the right way. And just make sure that you're putting yourself in the best position to see what great opportunities are out there.
So true. Absolutely. I remember for myself, when I was in jobs that I loved with bosses that I loved, where I really wasn't interested in looking around, someone somewhere along the way said to me, look, it's just a conversation. You only have a decision to make if you have a job offer on the table.
Right.
Up until that point, all you're doing is talking, and that's it.
Totally.
Right. So it's
exactly
not a betrayal. It's just a conversation, and a powerful one to have for all the reasons you just outlined. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Amy, just to add to it, this will be controversial, but I have no problem with that, because what I actually did was, if you understand how valuable you are to a company, and you know that you work really hard and you get great results and you are considered a top performer, and I was all of those things, I actually proactively told my boss when I had a call with a recruiter that I was like, yeah, I'm willing to talk to the hiring manager, because I said to him, this might be something. I think this is something that is actually very attractive to me. He had always said to me, tell me when a big opportunity comes along. And I said, okay, yeah, I will. And, that job moved very quickly, and I was offered it within 2 weeks. And it was something that I'm really glad I took that call. I wasn't originally planning to take the call, but another mentor of mine, brilliant female, who is the CEO of HubSpot, Yamini Rangan. Yeah. I was on an executive women in leadership call with her. We were on this course together, and I just happened to mention to her that this company had been messaging me, and she said, it's a great company, you should take the call. And so I did. Again, learned this lesson the hard way a little bit the way I describe it is, you need to make your world big, like look over the wall. Just make sure you know what else is out there, because even when you're happy, how do you know you couldn't be happier and get paid more money? Or how do you know you couldn't get paid more money internally as well, or get a bigger job title by negotiating better? And I'm very passionate about women in particular negotiating for themselves and making sure they maximize their value.
I love that, looking over the wall. That's really brilliant. I like the way you phrase that. So it takes so much energy to be a leader and to do this kind of work and have that kind of vulnerability, presence, and focus, and delivering the excellence that you so highly regard. And we all do this. How do you protect your energy? How do you keep your energy refueled?
Yeah, I want to be honest and say I haven't always been brilliant at this, and actively not brilliant sometimes. So it really frustrates me when my body is like, when I'm tired, or I just, and I got the seizures, or when I had chronic headache as well. So it used to frustrate me immensely, because I'm normally very high energy. But what I learned over the years was, I used to always be available on email on holidays. And I realized the last few years that was not serving me. And it was setting the wrong message internally, because what message that sends is that you are available and you prioritize the company over your life. And you can become a bit of a doormat. So now when I go on holidays, or whenever I'm working and I go on holidays, I delete email, I delete Slack, I delete LinkedIn. I tell people, call me if there's a people issue. That's the one thing I always care most about is people. I was like, if there's a people issue, call me. If not, leave me alone. You've got this. Leaders empower other leaders underneath them as well. Like, if you can't go on holidays and be forgotten for a week, well, then you haven't created a good business, because you should be empowering and creating other leaders underneath you. So I think it's insecurity that drives a lot of it. People feel like they always have to be on. I will also say, and apologies if I offend anyone, but I think there's a cultural difference between Europe and America. And America also seems to always be FaceTime work and all that nonsense. And I just don't buy into it. It's like, honestly, if you are excellent at what you do, you don't need to have to prove it 24/7. Holidays, weekends, evenings. No, that's your time. And you know what? You'll be better off for it, because you'll be a better leader when you refresh, re-energize, and come back with new perspective. And it's not a coincidence that often your best ideas happen when you're, in the shower, walking, whatever. It's because you give your brain space. And there's so much science to support this. So anyone who says otherwise, I just don't buy it.
I'm with you 100%. I think US is jacked up in how we
Mhm.
view time off. Like we talk about it, and some only a few places do people actually do it. And I do believe it's really up to leaders to set the example, to give permission to others. You talked about empowering others to take over while you're gone. Now that's like we could probably have a whole episode about that conversation. But I'd love you to share, like, is there an example, like hey, this is one of the things that I did to help make it so that I could go on a holiday. And when you say holiday, Wendy, how long's a holiday for you? How long?
So holiday, and sorry, I know Americans use the term vacation. So at least a week, and sometimes 10 days, and sometimes 2 weeks.
Beautiful.
It's yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So like, what were the things, like, what would you do to make sure things were going to just like run while you were gone? What was your approach?
Well, I would say the number one thing is you shouldn't be, it's also what you do when you're there all the time, right? So your leaders need to be leading. You don't need to be in every decision. Like, empower them to make decisions even when you're in the office. So you hire great people, trust them that they'll do great work. And if there's an issue, you can have a conversation, but empower them to make the decisions, and that starts when you're in the office. But then the other point I'd say is the bit about, again, not very interesting, but process. Once you've got processes in place, and, I used to have a regular meeting cadence for all the revenue leaders, for the sales reps, the KPIs, all of the foundational operational excellence. Once that in place, that runs. It's like everyone knows what's meant to happen. The QBR happens the second week of the quarter, of the new quarter. They know that's expected. There's a template. So you don't need to. Once you put processes in place, you hire great people, empower them. And also, I used to holiday loudly. It's like, I'm telling everyone I am on holidays. And I remember the first time with the firm, I hired an American rep, and I honestly was in the airport. I said, I will see you in a week. And he was calling me in the airport to ask me about stuff. I said, I'm on holidays. Yeah, I wasn't actually joking. He's like, well, wait, what? And I was like, yeah, no, you're the neediest rep I have. Like, go away. Like, I'm on holidays. You can figure this out. And guess what? You have leaders between me and you who can help figure it out. So it's, there's a little bit of discomfort that comes from it when people are like, but also that's where you grow, right? I want all of the people underneath me to take my job, right? That's, you should hire people who are better than you, and be confident enough in yourself that, like, give them a chance to shine. And so there's other stuff, like I used to pass sometimes when I wasn't available or I was away, I'd pass opportunities to other leaders to go on podcasts, to present or interview keynote speakers at events and all this sort of stuff, or to go on stage in London. It's like, I don't need to do it all the time. Like, again, other leaders, best leaders create other leaders. Pass the ball. One of my favorite business books is about the All Blacks rugby team. And it's called Legacy, and it's pass the ball is the phrase. And it's really important to pass the ball.
Yeah. I mean, I think about something super tactical that I used to do. We would have the big forecast calls every week. And some of them were with, me representing the team up to the super, the senior executives. And one of the things I would do on a regular basis when I wasn't on vacation, I would have one of them present in my place, so they could
brilliant.
get that practice of doing that and understand what that was like. So when I was gone and when I wasn't there, they had that experience, and it was one of the many things they could speak about the next job interview they were in, about how they had all this training and practical experience operating at that next level.
I love that. It's a great example. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think I might know this one based on what I just heard you say, and your body language. You completely lit up by this, but what part of the job does light you up? What's your favorite part?
Well, it's always the people. Like, so it's, I don't know if that was the answer you were expecting, but I am, there's nothing I love more than standing in front of a team and roaring, laughing with them, but also seeing people go beyond where they ever thought they could go. So, like, people fulfilling their full potential and coming in and being unsure of themselves, and, doing scary things, and then blowing out their targets, getting promoted, getting paid a lot of money, being able to fill their dreams when they do that. Like, that's the joy in it. And so I'm always people first, and I'm seeing the human. They're not just a colleague, they're human first, and everything that comes with that, all the messiness of being human. But then the building that culture, and I call it my flamingos, is when I try and build that culture of excellence, fun, and vulnerability. And it's, I think, the winning culture. And I think that's where people who get to be who they truly are, and they don't have to be some weird beige version of themselves. That's the best culture to build.
Beige version of yourself. Yeah.
Mm.
Wow. I definitely was that person for a long time.
It's something I was for a minute, but then, it's something you will never do your best work if you have to be a beige version of
No,
yourself. Like, it just
no,
doesn't work that way.
no.
So you're in the wrong place, or you're under the wrong leader, or you're in the wrong place if you find that you're having to play small, you can't speak up, you can't you can't have fun, you can't ask questions, be who you truly are. You're in the wrong environment, and it's not something wrong with you. You're under the wrong leader, or you're in the wrong place. And I have been in places where I have been absolutely the fullest version of myself, and the most neon pink version, other places where I'm just in the wrong environment. And it's like, get the hell out as soon as possible if you are, because that's not worth it. You've got bigger fish to fry, and you've more money and more fun to be had elsewhere. They don't deserve you.
So we've come already to our last question, Wendy. It's gone by fast. And this is it. What's that one lesson that you keep learning again and again?
Choose a boss, not a job. Choose a
Mm.
boss, not a job. Bosses, you choose the right boss, and they will make your wings wide, and they will give you those opportunities, and they will speak about you in rooms that you aren't in, and always open doors for you. And choose the wrong boss, and they will be threatened by you, and they will make you play small. And bosses can make or break your career, and a good boss can change your life. Find out, make sure you have a boss who, and by the way, it's not someone who always says not lovely things to you. It's someone who is straight to your face, tells you what you need to hear, even if it's uncomfortable sometimes, pushes you out of your comfort zone, but really cares about you personally as a human as well. And they do exist. And, I think, as you mentioned my LinkedIn posts earlier, the posts where I have gotten the most traction which is so wonderful to see, are when I talk about great bosses and people tag their great bosses. So there are loads of great bosses in the world. And there's lots of cynical people as well, but I have to say I get the most kicks out of seeing people tag their bosses all over the world who have been great to them and have given them big boots to fill. So find one of those bosses, because you're worthy of it.
I love it. Thank you so much. Well, Wendy Harris, it's been such a pleasure to get to spend a few minutes with you. And want to just offer my sincerest gratitude for making your time and sharing your story and being with us today. Thank you.
I love the conversation, Amy. Thanks a million for having me.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Women in Sales Leadership podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us and share this with a friend. I'm serious. Stop right now and take a look at the app, whatever app you're using to listen to this episode on, and hit follow and share this with a friend. Send them a text. See if they would enjoy this show as well, learning all about and meeting women in sales leadership. Hey, and if you know somebody who is crushing it in sales leadership and should be on this show, reach out to me on LinkedIn, Amy Evans, or the Women in Sales Leadership podcast. I would love to connect. See you next time.